Cheese is one of the oldest and most fascinating of all natural foods, and many of the finest benchmarks are still made by hand, the old-fashioned way, using unpasteurized raw milk. The reason for their enduring reputation is undoubtedly flavour. You only have to taste them to know they're really different to modern industrial cheese. However, traditional cheesemaking is under threat. So I'm on a mission to share this extraordinary world of dedicated and passionate farmers, cheesemakers and mongers with my daughter Ellie, before it's all gone. Roquefort is the most significant of all blue cheeses. It's one of the world's oldest cheeses and one of the few blue cheeses still made from raw milk. Its provenance has been protected by the French for hundreds of years. But even more importantly, it's the ancestor of all blue cheeses. If it hadn't been for the discovery of Penicillium roqueforti here in the village of Roquefort, blue cheese as we know it today would be very different. The origins of Roquefort lie in the dramatic Rocky Mountains of the Great Corse region, southeast of the geographical centre of France. Home to the world's tallest bridge, the foundation of this region's remarkable reputation for its iconic blue cheese dates back to Roman times and is intricately linked to a labyrinth of caves that lie beneath the craggy limestone of the Combloux Plateau. This unique geological formation was created millions of years ago when collapsing cliffs formed a system of well-ventilated caves 2 kilometres long and just 300 metres wide. According to local legend, their extraordinary alchemy was discovered entirely by chance when a shepherd abandoned his lunch of bread and cheese in the caves after being distracted from his flock by a beautiful shepherdess. Or perhaps it was a wolf. Either way, we'll never know. But one thing's for sure, on returning to the cave a month or so later, he found the bread and cheese had turned blue. And after taking a small bite, he discovered the combination tasted absolutely delicious. A legend was born. Roquefort is one of the most important cheeses of all French cheeses. And it's quite extraordinary the way those caves make such a difference to the blue cheese. And it's also the granddaddy of all blue cheeses, so that makes it important too.
That's where blue cheese came from, right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Basically, the season only runs from December until right at the end of June, and then that's it. So Roquefort's only made for 6 months of the year.
So quite a short season.
Yeah, and it's one of the only cheeses, AOP cheeses, that are only made for 6 months of the year. Even cheeses like Parmigiano Reggiano used to be made for just 6 months of the year when the milk was good, but nowadays they're made all year. So Roquefort is an exception. My love of Roquefort dates back some 4 decades to when I first began working with this French classic in London. But its significance took on a whole new meaning in 2002 when it was banned from sale by the Australian authorities, simply because it was made from natural unpasteurised raw milk. The ban on the most popular blue cheese in France had important implications for artisan cheesemakers and consumer choice in my newly adopted country. But there were also important ramifications for international trade. If Australian regulators could block the import of this fabulous French cheese, then sooner or later, other countries could follow. The precedent was far too important to ignore, and what followed was a long and protracted legal battle.
The consignment was denied entry into Australia because the cheese is made from unpasteurised milk.
My first step was to arrange for a trial shipment of 80 kilos of Roquefort to be sent to Australia for testing. But when the shipment arrived, the authorities refused to test it, instead ordering the offending cheese to be re-exported or destroyed by deep burial. Despite a number of threats and setbacks, I took the case to a court of appeal, and 18 months later, they ruled in favour of the authorities. I'd lost the case, and it was time to arrange a very special funeral. The foolishness of the situation was obvious, and a few years later, Australian and French authorities finally reached agreement on a special exemption to once again allow the sale of Roquefort in Australia. On my last visit to film Roquefort, I attended a ceremony deep within the caves of the largest producer, Société. And I also visited Carles, one of the smallest family producers. This time, Ellie and I have arranged to visit Papillon, one of the most respected export brands of Roquefort. And I'm very keen to find out more about recent proposals to review the use of raw milk for overseas sales.
L'histoire de Papillon, c'est l'histoire d'une entreprise familiale, c'est très important, qui existe depuis 1906. Ça fait donc plus d'un siècle que cette entreprise produit un fromage d'une exceptionnelle qualité. Dans ce village de Roquefort, il y a 7 fabricants. Nous sommes 7 fabricants qui produisons du Roquefort. Parmi ces 7 fabricants, il y a forcément les fromageries Papillon, et nous sommes le fabricant qui possède une grande marque, certainement, mais une grande marque de très grande qualité. Ensuite, nous sommes certainement également le fabricant qui est le plus présent au monde. Nous sommes présents dans 90 pays au monde.
All cheese bearing the name Roquefort has enjoyed a special protected status since 1411, when King Charles VI signed a charter giving the villagers sole rights to produce and age the famous cheese. A decree of the Toulouse Parliament in 1666 imposed heavy fines on dodgy merchants selling cheap imitations. And in 1925, Roquefort became the first appellation d'origine controlled cheese in France. Finally, in 1998, Roquefort was officially registered under the European Protected Designation of Origin system, known as PDO. Today, every aspect of production is very strictly controlled by a general confederation of farmers and producers. Cheese is made for just 6 months of the year and must be matured in the caves and remain in the designated region for at least 90 days. But the most important rule is that Roquefort is traditionally made only from fresh, natural, raw ewe's milk.
And this is where the story of Roquefort begins. Raw milk from Leghorn breed ewes. These animals spend much of the time inside, but just for a few months of the year, they're allowed out into the open paddocks. And that is when the best milk is produced, and that, of course, brings great cheese.
However, it seems in the past few years, Roquefort producers have begun to question the mandatory use of raw milk. I learnt that Papillon is one of the only producers arguing against what Dad calls a controversial cop-out.
La position de Papillon, c'est de continuer et de se battre pour maintenir le lait cru pour le Roquefort. Le Roquefort, c'est du lait cru avant tout. Du lait cru et du lait entier avant toute chose. Donc nous nous battons tous les jours pour maintenir cette position sur le lait cru.
The origin of the blue veins found in Roquefort are a collection of moles known as Penicillium roqueforti. In ancient times, these were harvested using special crusty rye bread, which captured the moles in the caves during the autumn equinox. Today, Papillon still honours the tradition by baking in an old wood-fired oven below the village.
Explain to me why it is important.
C'est très important de faire notre pain nous-mêmes pour cultiver nous-mêmes le pénicillium. Nous faisons nous-mêmes la culture du champignon.
So it's carbonized on the outside, but it's soft in the inside.
Nous mettons ensuite le pénicillium dedans et le pénicillium pousse à l'intérieur.
Ah, so the penicillium goes into the center and then works its way out.
Tout à fait.
So you bake this in the autumn, just before the full moon, and then it goes in the caves for how long?
Dans les caves, 70 jours.
60 days in the caves. When the bread comes out all moldy, the next step?
On le casse,
Break it,
on récupère l'intérieur,
rip out the interior,
on le broie et on récupère les spores de pénicillium.
and then you've got the little spores of penicillium.
Nous avons notre four à pain, notre boulanger et aujourd'hui, nous sommes le seul à faire cela.
The only one to have their own boulangerie.
Yeah, makes you guys unique.
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 It's estimated that a single gram of this precious bluey green powder contains about 25 billion mould spores. To see how it was added to the cheese by Papillon, Dad and I headed to the dairy where production was in full swing.
So the milk's been held overnight, starter's been added, then it's put into this big tank, and rennet's added. It's mixed up for the next hour. It's around 34 degrees, so it's still raw milk. And then what will happen is they'll cut the curd and mix it up for another hour. That way they ensure that the curd forms nice, strong piece of curd so they don't stick together. Because the most important thing with Roquefort is that there's enough air in the cheese to allow the blue to develop.
Right, so loosely packed as well.
Yeah, and loosely packed.
It is such a simple process, really, isn't it? Seeing it all rolled out.
Well, there's something wonderful about seeing beautiful milk like that just going, like calming.
Slowly the whey is drained from the tanks and the curds are delicately transferred onto a series of conveyors.
Okay, so Ellie, what's happening here is the curds are pumped over here and basically they're separated. So you have the curd here and the whey going out underneath. And then in this cylinder here is a very fine powder of Penicillium roqueforti mold grown on the bread. And basically that roll there just spreads it out across the curds. And that's why the cheese goes blue.
In a highly mechanised process, the fresh curds are placed into round hoops and allowed to drain overnight. Once the hoops have been removed, the young cheeses are dry salted. And then spiked with needles to allow oxygen to penetrate deep into the centre of the cheese. Then they are transported to the famous caves to start the all-important ripening process.
Ah,
Voilà notre nouvelle cave.
the modern cave.
Donc l'air est parcouru naturellement par la fleurine que l'on va voir tout à l'heure.
So this is all naturally cooled down. And look, here, this is the Penicillium roqueforti. This is the earth, the air, the water of the mountains. You can just see it falling through the top of the cave here. Look at that. There you have it. The secret ingredient of every blue cheese on the planet. Penicillium roqueforti. Amazing. Fleurine.
Oui, on voit la fleurine, elle passe comme ça,
Wow.
de part en part.
Look at that. Huge, just goes all the way through. This massive crack in the rock is known as a fleurine, and it pulls cold air from the top of the plateau down into the caves of Roquefort. It's the secret of why they stay so humid and cold. And there's a big gust of cold air coming down here right now, and you can see this if I light this flame. how long does the PDO require the cheese to stay in the caves?
Alors l'AOC nous oblige à garder au moins 14 jours le fromage, mais Papillon garde au moins 21 jours le fromage en cave.
So 14 days is the PDO, but Papillon is 21 days.
Voilà.
Yeah.
Ce fromage-là, il a 6 jours de cave, et on peut observer qu'il commence à devenir bleu de l'intérieur vers l'extérieur.
So this is just the start of the bluing process. So you can just see the blue starting on the inside, and that will gradually just bloom out through the cheese over the next 21 days.
On va voir un fromage plus affiné tout à l'heure.
So 16 days in the caves, look how different it is after 6.
Yeah,
Vous voulez goûter?
sure.
Looks like ready to eat.
Yes.
And what's the next step after this?
Alors la prochaine étape, ça va être d'envelopper ce fromage dans une feuille d'étain pour que le roquefort rentre en dormance. Il va respirer lentement et on va le mettre dans des frigos de maturation lente.
The wrapping of Roquefort in foil is a crucial step in production because it slows maturation by limiting the amount of oxygen that can reach the blue mould inside the cheese. Then the cheeses are moved to a modern cold storage facility near the village.
A lot of people don't realise that Roquefort must be matured under PDO regulations for at least 90 days in the region before it's sold. So the cheese is wrapped in foil and brought here to be held at -4 degrees for at least 2 months. It's only then that it's considered to be at its optimum and ready to be sold to the world.
All Roquefort must be cut and packed in the designated region. And one of the best ways to buy it is cut fresh from the half loaf. But to meet the needs of larger stores, it's also pre-packed in various sizes. As stricter controls are placed on the sale of Roquefort by authorities all around the world, the testing and packaging process is becoming more and more important.
It's good.
Parfait. Il est très aromatique, très équilibré.
Very balanced, very aromatic,
Visuellement, la pâte est bien blanche.
beautifully white,
Les ouvertures sont très belles.
beautiful openings.
Et il y en a partout.
It tastes a lot more strong and mature than it was in the caves as well.
Oh, definitely. And this is ready to go now.
Papillon has managed to preserve the traditional use of raw milk in the production of Roquefort. And before leaving, I was very keen to find out how they saw the future.
Le Roquefort, dans sa définition, c'est du lait cru, du lait entier. C'est affiné dans des caves naturelles à Roquefort. C'est aussi simple que ça. Si nous faisons un fromage avec d'autres caractéristiques, ce ne sera plus un Roquefort, ce sera un bleu de brebis. Donc nous sommes en plein dans une réforme qui permet de réorganiser 1850 producteurs d'un côté, 7 fabricants de l'autre côté. C'est loin d'être simple, ça fait plusieurs années qu'on travaille dessus. J'espère que cette année, on arrivera au bout de cette réforme qui permettrait, je le souhaite, de préserver tout le périmètre de Roquefort. Les producteurs, les fabricants, les salariés, tout le tissu économique local.
Whilst we're in the village of Roquefort, I couldn't resist the opportunity of showing Ellie the Carles caves. On my last visit, Jacques Carles and I spent several spellbinding hours touring these caves, where I was delighted to see the company had retained the use of traditional oak shelving, with some timbers dating back 400 or 500 years. Jacques has since retired and left his daughter Delphine Carles in charge.
It must be 10 years since I last came to visit your father, and you've taken over, which is wonderful. The family business. Can you tell me how things have changed in the last decade for Roquefort?
We have the same process of production, or is the same?
Everything's the same.
Everything is the same.
I can see that you're still maturing the cheese on the wood. Does that create a problem?
No, it's not a problem.
So what do you think about the larger producers moving towards plastic?
It's not good for quality. That's why we prefer to preserve our process. I would like to stay the same, to preserve quality. It's always the same thing for us, to preserve quality of original product. If you don't use raw milk, the quality change.
So you will stick, you will fight for the fabrication of raw milk. Good.
I say I want to keep my raw milk, and the best I think is to use the two production, raw milk and pasteurized milk. Then we use raw milk, and the other industrial can use pasteurized. I think it's a solution, but I represent 1% of production.
In Delphine's opinion, one solution might be to allow industrial producers of Roquefort to use pasteurised milk.
What makes Carles so special?
A lot of things. First of all, we use the milk of the day, the morning milk, and the evening. And it's rare in Roquefort to do that. It's quite different for quality, because we put very few ferments,
Starters.
very few. It's quite natural, and we produce by hand and using Papillon Roquefort from bread.
This burnt loaf is a good example of how they grow the Penicillium roqueforti mould in the Carles caves. They've drilled little holes inside the bread in which they've put special strains that they use just for their cheese. And over the next month or so, it'll grow inside the bread before it's dried and used for sprinkling on the fresh curds.
We try to preserve traditional way of production. The fact we choose Roquefort for each customer.
So a customer can say, I want it like this, and then you change the process. Wow.
Change the ripening to have Roquefort. For some people who prefer blue Roquefort, some prefer very soft and salt and different.
It's very special that you are able to do that. Yeah.
Perhaps we could go and have a taste.
Yeah.
And you'll see the difference. One of the things about the Carles Roquefort is every batch is a little different.
Donc on va goûter. We have 3 different batches.
So creamy, salty, beautiful.
Really soft. Really soft. Quite salty though, quite salty.
But this one is creamy and not salty.
It's not like the industrial cheese, which is always the same. Every batch is different.
Milk is different. Every day milk is different.
Yeah.
It's quite a dark blue with the mould as well. Does that make it more salty often? If it's darker blue?
No. It's a taste more stronger when the blue is more dark. The taste is stronger.
You know, the fact you like this and Delphine and I like the other one just goes to show there's a different cheese for everyone. It makes it interesting.
That's why we prefer when customer comes and say, I prefer this one. You can adapt to each customer.
Celebrate the difference. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I prefer this one.
Yeah. I think the same.
I never cease to be fascinated by the history and politics of Roquefort, and the opportunity to show Ellie where and how this wonderful benchmark is made has been very special. After my visit, I can only hope that in future the producers remain true to the traditions that have enabled Roquefort to survive as a unique raw milk cheese with a genuine sense of place. If not, it certainly won't be the cheese we know today, and future generations will never know what they missed out on. Long live the King of the Blues.